Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be telling you how champagne is made, and we're going to be tasting two wonderful MCCs from Steenberg. First of all, let's speak a little bit about champagne. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you know what champagne is, but the word champagne is generally used to describe any kind of sparkling wine. However, the only wines that can be labelled as champagne have to come from the Champagne region of France. So Champagne is located in northern France, and not only does it have to be from Champagne, but to call the wine as such, you have to use specific grapes and make it in a specific way and adhere to all kinds of other technical things. So obviously, all the sparkling wine we make in South Africa is not champagne. However, there are wines that we call MCC, which stands for Méthode Cap Classique, and these are wines that have been made in exactly the same way as they make them in Champagne, but they're from South Africa. So the wines I've chosen today to taste are the MCCs from Steenberg, and those are their white MCC made from exclusively Chardonnay grapes, and their pink MCC made from exclusively Pinot Noir. So in Champagne, the three principal grapes are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and also Pinot Meunier. And the winemaker has a little bit of freedom in terms of the quantities of each grape that goes into a wine. So let's open our first MCC, get tasting, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about how champagne is made, or how MCC is made. First up, there's Steenberg MCC Chardonnay. There you go. Let's open her up. As you can see, there's this thing here called a muselet, and this was invented to prevent the corks popping off champagne bottles during secondary fermentation and causing all sorts of havoc. So that's a little cage. And opening a champagne bottle, you should leave the cage on before removing the cork. Probably going to screw this up. Nicely done. So the bottle is very wet from the condensation, so I'm gonna have to use two hands. And as anyone who's poured champagne before will know, the initial dollop that you put in the glass kind of fizzes up. And this is because of impurities in the glass that cause the nucleation of the bubbles, as well as the impurities in the glass. Cellulose fibers from a cloth that you might have used to dry the glass, that can also cause that initial fizz. But then usually on your second pour, let's have a look. Yeah, on the second pour, the fizz isn't quite so hectic. So there we go. It's a nice pale gold color. There's maybe even a kind of slight green tinge as well. And I'm using these beautiful Art Deco glasses. So I will admit that I find picking up on the aromas in champagne a lot more difficult than in usual wines. Not sure why that is. It might be a case of that sort of very characteristic yeasty taste that we get in MCCs and champagne. I think my nose sort of picks up on that and then finds it a bit harder to pick up on the other aroma characteristics. But yeah, it's got definitely some citrus, slight herbaceousness as well. Think fynbos. Fynbos is basically the local South African vegetation. But yeah, very, very clean and fresh smelling. Again, clean and fresh palate. There's a slight minerality, which, like I mentioned before, love in a wine. Yeah, slightly brioche taste as well. Sort of bready, brioche, pastry sort of taste. Yeah, and a lingering finish too. Okay, so let's talk about how champagne is made. So obviously, to make champagne, you first need wine. So grapes are harvested, brought into the cellar. The grapes are then pressed and the juice runs off. And then this juice is fermented with yeast. So the yeast eats the sugar in the grapes and poops out carbon dioxide and alcohol. Once the primary fermentation is finished, the wine is bottled in the champagne bottle. Once the wine is in the bottle, a little bit more yeast and sugar is added. Then a cap is put on the bottle, and secondary fermentation happens exactly the same way as primary fermentation. The yeast eats the sugar, releasing carbon dioxide and a little bit more alcohol. But because there's a cap on that bottle, the carbon dioxide can't escape as a gas, so it's kept under pressure until obviously you open a champagne bottle and bubbles come out. For a champagne to be called champagne or for a wine to be designated MCC, they need to be on the lees for at least 18 months, which means once the yeast has finished secondary fermentation, they die and they sit in the champagne. So the consequence of the dead yeast cells remaining in the champagne is that they impart that sort of bready and yeasty aroma to the champagne. At the end of the 18 months, the dead yeast cells are removed by turning the bottle upside down. The bottleneck is frozen, the cap popped off, and then the yeast comes flying out. After that, the bottle's topped up with wine, sulfur, and sometimes a dash of sugar. This is called the dosage. And then a cork is shoved in, and there you have your bottle of champagne ready to go. Okay, let's move on to our second MCC of the day. There we go. So it's the MCC Pinot Noir, and both of these are dry. So you'll know that a champagne or MCC is dry because on the label it should say brut, or brut is the French pronunciation. Cool. Let's open this one up. That was much easier than the first time. Yes, and that pale pink color is so beautiful. I'd say that was a sort of salmon with a tinge of silver color. Those citrus characteristics that I was picking up on the Chardonnay, they're not really present at all, but instead there's a really, really pleasant sort of cherry aroma. Yep, cherry characteristics coming through on the palate as well. There's even some raspberry notes, a little bit of strawberry. Definitely more full-bodied than the Chardonnay, more substantial wine, still very refreshing. Blanc de Noir champagnes or MCCs tend to be a little weightier than the Blanc de Blanc, which is champagne made exclusively from Chardonnay. But yeah, the Pinot Noir made in the same way as the Chardonnay, so the process of secondary fermentation in the bottle and then lying on the lees for 18 months and then disgorging and then the final product. So the year on both of these is 2014, I believe. Anyway, so the grapes themselves would have been harvested in 2014 and then the final product would have been released in, well, this year. There we go, 2 champagnes tried in one video. Steenberg makes absolutely fantastic wines besides these 2 brilliant MCCs, and it's an absolutely gorgeous estate. They've got wonderful restaurants there as well, so if you're in the Cape Town area, do get down there. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.